Hello friends, this is with respect to ISO 17025-2017 International Standard for the general requirements of the competence of testing and calibration of the laboratories. In India, it is popularly known as the NABL requirements because the NABL is an accreditation organization and NABL accredits the laboratories who complies with the requirement of 17025 and implements the standard in total. So this particular version is a brief picture of ISO 17025. Whoever is not familiar with this is not a detailed presentation, but just to give a input or the brief information about the standards who are not much familiar with this standard. Okay. This standard encompasses of 8 clauses. Usually any standard, the first 3 clauses are of much generic, like it covers the scope, normative references and definitions. The scope normally gives what exactly the important activities of the entire standard. In fact, scope also gives what is the area that is covered with this standard. So in this standard, scope means the requirements for the competency, impartiality and consistent operations of the laboratories. What this really means is a laboratory should have all the competent requirements, their people should be the competent and their equipment, environmental, all other requirements should be competent enough to comply with the requirements of the customer as well as the statutory bodies. And some of the important thing is the impartiality, like a lab should be unbiased in its operations, and the consistent operations indicates that laboratory is maintaining their standards without any fluctuations or deviations. So this is covered under the scope. Another normative general clause is the normative references. This only means that what are the reference standards that generally we refer. This particular standard refers to ISO IEC Guide 99 and ISO IEC 17000, which are indispensable for the application of this particular document. But in a laboratory, you may have furthermore references like your course of practices and other testing methods of testing standards, national or international. So all those standards you can refer under the clause 2. Now coming back to the terms and definitions. This is a specific clause which varies from all other standards, like each standard has a different terms and definitions. The purpose of this is to clarify some of the terms. In ISO 17025, there are certain terms like decision rule. Normally, decision rule is not easily understandable by the laboratory people or the implementers. So what exactly decision rule and how you have to understand that. Similarly, intra-laboratory, what is a complaint? So some of the terms, I'm not going to give you the detailed standard definitions for each and everything, but the standard talks about those things. Okay, so in the terms and definitions, not only whatever standard has given, but you can also include some of the terms which are not common or not easily understandable by either the laboratory personnel or anybody who is associated with your standard. Now the first and important clause for this 17025 starts with the general requirements. Here I just wanted to emphasize that this particular standard, which is a revision in 2017, whose predecessor standard was ISO 17025-2005. In 2005, they have compartmentalized the entire requirement of the laboratories into the management requirements and the technical requirements. But in this standard, they try to integrate to have the seamless understanding of the activities. So now, if we start thinking about the laboratory establishment, it starts with what exactly the required policies. One of the important required policy is to establish the impartiality and confidentiality. Here the impartiality means all your activity should be unbiased, objectively oriented, so that persons who are engaged in the lab activities will not be influenced by any external or internal pressures. So that is exactly the impartiality with which the customer will have the confidence in your laboratory. Now coming back to the confidentiality, as you know, the confidentiality is something which we will not share to each and every one. So in this laboratory, when the term confidentiality means you have to share the information only to those who are authorized, and who are not authorized, you should not share that information. Particularly, customer gives you a lot of information with respect to your samples for testing or a calibration. So other persons, other laboratories, other competitors should not know about this customer. So that way you have to maintain the confidentiality of each activity, which will otherwise endanger the confidence of your laboratory with the customers. Now coming back to the establishment of the laboratory. So this is how you establish the laboratory. In laboratory, structural requirements, that is the important clause wherein you need to comply with certain requirements. The first and foremost requirement is the legal entity. So legal entity means a laboratory should be legally registered, so legally challengeable. The very purpose is that your laboratory is not your private activity, it is a public activity. You are doing the job or a testing or a calibration or sampling for the customer. So the customer is the outsiders. So whenever two parties are involved, legal implications and legal complications are common. Hence, it has to be a legal entity. Then you should have your own management, and management should identify the responsible and authorities and responsible persons. Irrespective of their other words, a person or a team of a person should be ensuring that all the compliance to the all requirements of this particular standard. Hence, the top management has to identify who is responsible for what. Then in this you will certainly specify what is the scope. Here in this scope, that means, for example, your laboratory is maintaining so many activities like calibration and testing, but you wanted to go for a accreditation only for the scope. Then you can restrict your scope only to the testing. Even in the testing, you have so many requirements, but for some reason or for some customers' requirement, you wanted to, out of 10 normal testing requirement, you wanted to go only for the 5 requirement. So you should specify that you are going to have this particular standard implemented for only those 5 requirements. So once you establish and you define and you document, you should not cross that limit. Like, you cannot claim that your laboratory is getting accredited for all the requirements. Whatever you specify, only those requirements you have to mention in the document and comply with. So another clause in the structural requirement is the total compliance with the ISO 17025 requirement. What it really means is, what are the requirements It has both technical as well as a managerial, although they are not specifically compartmentalized. As we discuss, you will understand what are the technical requirements and what are the managerial requirements. So you should comply with these requirements. That should be a part of your class 5 where you define and document. Then you should have your organizational structure, like your organizational chart, who is the topmost authority, chief authority, top management, and what are the departments, who are the personnel. All those the total information has to be specified under this class 5. Then you also have to specify who are the persons doing what are the activities. That means who is the authority, who are the personal with a particular authority and particular responsibility. There should not be any confusion or any overlapping. One person given a particular activity for the calibration of equipment or a testing of a particular requirement, then other person who is not authorized cannot do that. So that way you have to specify. Then another and most important is the communication process. See, each organization survives only based on the communication. So here the communication process has to be very clear. Employees should understand what organization wants. Organization as a top management should understand what the employees or the persons who are working are doing and their requirements. So the communication should be very, very important. Whatever the communication channel you establish through electronic, through telephone, or whatever the way you wanted to do it with using all the technology, that has to be well established so that there should not be any communication gaps. And here another important thing is internal communication as well as the external communication. See, an organization, I am not an isolated entity. I need to have, for example, accreditation body is a external. Statutory bodies are external. Or the suppliers who supply equipment or chemicals or any other laboratory thing, they are external. Similarly, you outsource some of your activities like housekeeping or calibration. So they are also external. So you should also establish the communication with the external. What are your requirements? They should understand, and how they cope with your requirements, you should also understand. The next important clause is resource requirement. In the resource requirement, the standards specify what are in general the requirement. Then the most important is the personnel. When we are talking about the personnel, the competency of the personnel is more important. Yes, the competency means not just qualification and experience, but it is the overall ability to do the work which is assigned to a particular person and should get a desired output, desired results. It's not that a person carry out some work and some results will come. It is competency means ability to perform a particular activity to give the desired results. So all the personnel should be with the competency. How you recruit the personnel, how you train, all those things have to be very much detailed under this particular requirement. Then the next is the facilities and environmental conditions. See, your laboratory is carrying out certain activities like testing, sampling, or a calibration. So what are the facilities you should know? You should have it. For example, if you have a chemicals, whether you should have a certified reference material. If you have a equipment, they should be calibrated. If you have a testing, there should be approved test methods. So like that, you should also ensure that whatever the facilities you have, as per the customer requirement, only should be included in this. Okay, so the next important thing is the equipment. Obviously, when you are having a laboratory, you should have an equipment, and that equipment should be suitable for a particular testing. Particularly, equipment has some limitations like a range, accuracy. We cannot measure the 100 kg with 1 kg into 100 times. The accuracy will go. Similarly, you cannot have 10 grams in a 100 kg machine. So what is the accuracy, what is the suitability, all those things you should understand and then give the detailed equipment. When we are talking about the equipment should have a total history. What is the test requirement, what type of a equipment is required, what type of a chemical glassware is required, how the equipment should be calibrated, range and accuracy, what is the frequency of the calibration, all those things have to be specified with this equipment. The next and most important, which not everybody is familiar with this, is metrological traceability. So when I am talking about the metrological traceability, it is something related to the measurement process for the calibration. When I give my equipment for a calibration, I should know with which equipment my equipment is calibrated. And that equipment should have a traceability to the primary standard. Here I just wanted to briefly say what is the primary, secondary and the working standard. See, primary standard is ultimate accurate standard. In India, for example, for some of the equipment, the National Physical Laboratory is having an ultimate. Similarly, in other countries like NIST, National Institute of Science and Technology for the USA, for certain materials, it is American standards for the testing and material, that is ASTM. So like that, it should have a primary standard which cannot be challenged for its quality and accuracy. So my equipment has to ultimately get the calibration traceable to the primary. I give my equipment to a secondary, then the secondary standard should be calibrated to with the primary. Then only I can understand that my equipment will be working well with the calibration. So this is the metrological traceability, and you should have an unbroken chain of the record you should be maintaining. And another thing is external provided products and services, which means whatever you are using the external or outsourcing, all those things should be covered under this. But when you give some work to the external, you should also have controls. Like subcontractors, you should have a control. Suppliers, you should have a controls. Calibration agencies, you should have a control. Unless you have a controls, you should not, you are not able to know what are their capacity or competence. So you have to ensure that whatever the services or products you are buying from outside or subcontracting, all those agencies or all those organizations should have the equally competent people to work. Next one is the process requirement. This is the core activity of your laboratory. So for what we have discussed with the class 4, you have a policy of the impartiality and confidentiality. With the class 5, you have established your laboratory as a legal entity with whatever is required, licenses, documentations and responsibility. With the class 6, we have discussed what is the competent resources that are required, like a personal, equipment, environmental and outsourcing. And with all these things, now you start your activity. That is the process requirements. It covers all your core activities, and it starts with the contact with the customer. See, our laboratory always does carry out the work only if we get samples from the customer. So how you accept the customer samples and what type of a review you make. Whatever the sample customer gives to you, will not accept unless you have that facilities are available with you. Similarly, customer may ask a different kind of versions of the standards which are outdated, whether you accept or not. All those details will be discussed under the class 7.1. So in which very clearly you should know who is the customer, what are the requirements, what is the practices you should maintain with them, how the customer should be cooperated with your activities, and how customer should accept your reports with a confidence. Then another thing is the selection, verification and validation of methods. In this is a specific, not to all the laboratories, but some of the laboratories. If you have more than one or two or more test methods which are approved, then you should know which test method you should be selecting for doing the test. Similarly, if you are modifying or you are having a non-standard or a new test method, which is not acceptable in general, then you should validate through verification process, and after validation and approval only you should be using that. Now the sampling, whoever is involved in the sampling, because this 17025 is not just for testing and calibration, but it also for the sampling. See, for example, some of the things you only involved in the sampling, like testing the samples and giving it to the laboratories. How you do the sampling, what type of equipment you are using for the sampling, who is the competent persons to bring the sampling, all those details should be specified in the class 7.3 of sampling. And the next important in the process requirement is the handling of test or a calibration. Like if your lab is a testing laboratory, then the moment sample is received at your laboratory or you are getting the sample, how you handle, so that the integrity of the sample should not be lost. It should not be changed or corrupted or manipulated. Similarly, the calibration equipment also you have to know how to handle it, because there are certain sensitive equipment or sensitive samples. So if the handling is not properly done, then the properties or values of that particular test sample will be varying. Similarly, calibration equipment also may give erratic readings if you are not properly maintaining and handling. So next is the technical record. Because why we use the technical records, not simply normal records, because all the technical records are important with 17025, because those are the records associated with all your technical activities, starting from the receipt of the samplings to ultimately giving the test report to the customer. So all those records you have to ensure. Here you need to identify what are the general record and what are the technical records based on your activity. Okay, so the another thing is the evaluation of measurement uncertainty. As some of you may are aware, uncertainty means if you are not sure. See, when we measure, always there may be some error. There are two types of the errors will be there. One is you can easily understand there is an error. Another thing is you are not sure whether there is an error or not. So uncertainty means unknown error. See, in any measurement there may be some error which may be minus or which may be plus. So that doesn't mean that uncertainty always there should be error. So uncertainty, there can be zero error or minus error or plus error. So in this class you have to have the methods how to measure the uncertainty, what is the error, plus error or minus error, how this error should be associated with your final results. That is what this class will be talking about. Then the validity of the results. Here there are two important issues will be there. When you are doing all these things, the customer, why a question is there, the customer, why should he believe that your results are accurate? So we have to prove that how much efforts we are taking. There are variety of the activities that we are ensuring to prove that our results are validated. Like we are using the approved equipment with the calibration, retesting, repeated testing, or sometimes we do the intra-laboratory, within the laboratory 2 or 3 times, and then we will check the results. So, or we do a blind sampling, means the samples results are not known. Then first you do the testing and then compare with the results. Then if they are same, then your testing is okay. So that is how you are doing, which is all internal validation. Similarly, external validation also you need to do it, because customer should also believe that not only you are okay internally, but external also you are getting a approval. So in which external there are two methods are there. One is the proficiency testing, other one is the inter-laboratory comparison. In case of a proficiency testing, there is a ultimate testing body which is normally approved by the NABL. So they offer certain samples to each laboratories and their results are the ultimates. So they allow other laboratories to do the testing and then they compare their values to our already done laboratory testings, that is with their own laboratories, because their own laboratories are always accurate. That is the stand normally they take in the proficiency testing. Then they will compare, and if there is any error or any deviation, that means your laboratory is having some problem in getting the correct test results. Another technique which we generally to be used is the inter-laboratory. That means one laboratory who is going for accreditation or who is already NABL certified, they do the testing, and same sample or similar identical sample will be given to other laboratories, 3 or 4 laboratories or more. Then they will compare the results. Accordingly, they will be doing it. If the results are uniform, they are okay, then that means your validity of the results both externally and internally, they are fine. That way the customer have the confidence in your activities. Now the reporting result, there should be a methodology of a reporting the results. So how a test report should be given, what are the contents in the test report. This class clearly talks about common requirements, specific requirements, all those things will be talking. One of the important thing in the reporting results is the opinions and interpretations and conformity statement. Conformity statements means it is a pass or fail. Then the reporting, your opinions and interpretations means they are subjective. So how you come to a conclusion about these things, that is important. So all those things will be reported so that there should not be any deviation or error. The next important clause is the complaints. You know, the complaints is the feedback with a dissatisfaction. Any customer, even not only from the customer, from any other outside agency who are associated with you, like a suppliers or a statutory bodies, any feedback that you receive which is not a satisfactory, then that is a complaint. So whenever a complaint is come, how you deal with this, there should be a procedure to receive and acknowledge and investigate and ultimately redress the complaint. The next important clause is the non-conforming work. The entire actually the management system depends on this non-conforming work, because if you are not having any non-conforming work, that means your system is perfect, but it is not every time possible. So whenever you are doing some work implementing the system, there is a kind of a deviation will be there. Non-conformity means it is a deviation from the approved or agreed work. So how you identify, how you deal with the non-conforming, all the details are discussed in this class. And finally, with this process requirement, the control of data and information. When you carry out so much activity, lot of data is generated. How the data is stored, restored, and how you maintain that is confidentiality, all those information you have to address in this class 7.11. Okay. Now finally, the last class is the management systems. That means this is a launch pad. Ultimately, class 4, 5, 6, 7 have to be on a particular platform called the management system documentation platform. So in this 17025 gives you 2 options. Although they are not much important to discuss, but in general, when options are given, what are these options? See, why 2 options are given? If a laboratory is already established as per the ISO 9001 standard. See, because this 17025 takes the parent standard as a 9001 standard for its structural requirements. So some of the common requirements are there in 17025 and 9001. If you are already implementing those, you need not to repeat it. You only need to satisfy that those requirements already you have done. So that is the option B. But in the case of a option A, if you are going for a first time or you do not have a 9001 standard established, then you can go for the option A, in which you need to implement all the requirements starting from the class 4, 5, 6, 7, from the 8 again, 8.3 to 8.9. So now what are this 8.3 to 8.9? Very briefly we can discuss. In 8.3, it is a control of the system documents. You have generated so many documents including your quality manual, quality policy, quality objectives, plus procedural documents, work instruction documents, test methods. Those are all the things are the documents. So in the document there are two type of a document. One is the internal document which is created by you, which you are using in your activity, laboratory activity. Other one is the external document which you have purchased or which you have got from outside, like a standard, national standard, international standard, or the equipment manuals given by the original equipment manufacturer. Those are all the external. So how you control? With respect to the external, you have to see whether it is a current requirement, are there any revisions or not. You have to be careful. Internal document, you have to make sure that correct procedure is there and the procedure is reviewed, approved by the authority. So that is how you have to control the document. Another thing which is related to the document are the records. Records is also a type of a document. In the records, normally general documents under the clause 8.3 and another document under the clause 8.4, we can classify the documents with the two titles. One is the guidance document, other one is the performance document. In guidance document, the management system documents which will guide you like a standards test procedures. In performance documents, once you activity is carried out, you record that activity is already performed. You cannot change once a record is there. That is performed. Whereas in case of a guidance document, based on the requirements, you can revise. So it is important to have a control on the performance documents. How to keep it, how long you have to keep it, whether electronic or a backup is required. All those things you have to ensure under this class, control of records. Okay, in this standard, based on the 9001, this clause is also construct the addressing the risk and opportunities. See, normally in earlier versions we were talking about the corrective actions and preventive actions. In this we do not talk about the preventive actions, but we talk about the corrective actions under the clause 8.7. But preventive actions, is it not required? Yes, it is required. For preventive actions we have re-term as a risk, because risk is nothing but a potential threat to our activities. Preventive action is also action required for a potential non-conformity. So here we are identifying the risk as a non-conformity that is likely to occur which has not occurred so far. So how to address? Then you have to study the process mapping, and wherever the risks are there with respect to the impartiality, with respect to the confidentiality, and with respect to any possible non-conformity, all those things you have to address in your entire process under this clause 8.5. And each risk is also associated with opportunities. Normally everybody talks about the risk and opportunities, the corona period which we have undergone few years back. So the corona, which has a risk, wherever it is there, it also has given an opportunity. One of the important opportunities is your technological development, online trainings and all those things. So you have to see how the risk is there, what are the opportunities. Under 8.5 you discuss these things. Then for the next clause is the improvement. Ultimately our aim is only to improve upon. It is not that I establish a system and it remains same for years and decades. No. Then there is no point. And anything which is not improved, it becomes a stagnant. Like in a competition, if you are walking, if others are running, then your walking has no meaning. If you are also running, others are running, how fast you run is important. Always there is an improvement. A system today is obsolete tomorrow. It is like yesterday's newspaper. So you have to understand where are the areas of improvement is there with the technological development. For example, a laboratory says that it is fully established, ultimately they are getting lot of profits and very good customers and fully capacity they are using it. Is there any chance of improvement? Yes, there should be. You can save the time. Instead of 6 hours working, You can work same thing within 4 hours and get the results using the technology, using the updated methods. So like that, in each and every activity you have to identify the chances for the improvement. And with respect to the next class 8.7 corrective actions, corrective action means wherever a non-conformity is there, you have to simply do not throw that. You have to understand why that non-conformity has come. So, for which you have to do a root cause analysis. Corrective action, we will be discussing what are the root cause analysis, what is the root cause, and what is how the root cause techniques are there. Some of the important techniques normally we use is a fishbone diagram or a cause and effect diagram. So, what is the cause and what should be the effects, like is it a men, material, machinery, methods, like that there are so many parameters you have to see. Similarly, there is another thing called why. I mean, you should ask why this happened. Then you go back to the next why. So like that also. There are so many other techniques also there. You can also create your own corrective action techniques. Then after doing all these things, you have to ensure that your system is in place and everything is going on well. For which you have to check. That is called the internal audits. Before we allow the external audit people to come and audit, we have to do regularly internal audit. Because in any operations, errors or missing something is very much possible. So that we should ensure that there should not be any such gaps. So internal audits help, and this internal audits professionally we have to conduct, systematically, scientifically we have to conduct, maintain a checklist, maintain a documentation, and maintain what is the output, what are the findings after this audit. That will help us to further improve. And finally, the entire system implementation of the system depends on the top management and its commitment. So unless the top management is interested, no system, no organization will work properly. So the top management should review all your activities on a regular intervals, whether everything is okay or not. In many organizations rather, they say that they are doing everything fine, but sometimes the resources are less. So they simply hide that because boss may say something, they hide and they do something. But actually, because of the lack of resources, the quality is affected. So you have to, as a top management, address all these issues. What is the non-conformity? Where are the non-conformities are there? What are the internal audits? How you wanted to satisfy the customer? If there are any customers' complaints, how you wanted to redress? All those things you will be discussing under the management review. Okay, so this is in brief about the various classes of ISO 17025. Now, let us know what are the key benefits of ISO 17025. Of course, this is not a comprehensive or exhausted list. Obviously, any system we do in a disciplined and systematic way, there are obvious advantages with it. Because any system basically offers three important things. One is the transparency in the operations, other thing the prediction, then the next is the satisfaction by the customer. So confidence of the employees. These are some of the things any system will be helpful in getting these results. So now key benefits are that your laboratory demonstrate the competency and your results are consistent and valid results because you have done the internal validation and external validation. And obviously 17025 being an international standard, these requirements are accepted internationally. Your lab report will be accepted by any other country also. Then this supports the continuous improvement, because in one of the clauses we have discussed improvement is one important thing. Based on the risk analysis and opportunities, we always do the improvement. And finally, the bill payer is the customer. Unless you satisfy the customer and gain the customer's confidence, organization will not run. So this will enhance the customer's confidence. See, this is all in brief about the ISO 17025. I think I will be able to transform some of the important information. I represent an organization called Global Integrated Management Services based in Hyderabad. And anyone who wanted to have a detailed training also can contact us. Any questions, we have an email given to them, so you can also write to us by email. Before that, before I conclude, I just wanted to give you, if somebody is going for the accreditation, like NABL accreditation, what are the stages, what are the steps you have to do it? The first and foremost important is the gap analysis. See, here where is the gap? We are having some activities, some documentation, but the standard wanted us to do some activities and some documentation to comply with the NABL R17025 requirement. We should understand where is the gap and what is the real gap. So that gap analysis will help us to take steps. Then based on that, you have to give the training and awareness programs to the employees of the organization. And accordingly, as per the requirement of the standard, then document has to be developed. Then you implement for the requirements. Once implementation is done, whether it is properly implemented or not, you conduct the internal audit, and after internal audit you do a management review involving the top management. If there are any issues are there, you have to take the corrective actions. Once corrective actions are there, you have taken, and the corrective actions are implemented effectively without any further non-conformities, then you are good to go for the accreditation. So then you submit the documents as per the statutory requirements, and then you go for the audit. So that way you can get your accreditation process.